So I am Sherry Bungie Mortenson. I served here at Bethel for 23 years as the Associate Dean of Campus Ministries and also served in a variety of teaching roles while I was here. So what brought me to Bethel was being a seminary student. I was at the seminary for 3 years, and to be honest, I didn't have a lot of contact with the college, really didn't have any experience with the college. I would see college students walking around Lake Valentine, and my focus was on the seminary. My last year of seminary, there were 2 women who were getting their MDivs, myself and another woman, and she was very angry and very wounded. And at the time, I was a people pleaser, very new in my faith. And so I typically was the one that was asked as the token woman to pray or to do different events, which made her even more wounded and upset. And I didn't really understand this. I loved Bethel. I thought everyone was wonderful. And I really didn't understand some of the dynamics going on. So I was typically the token MDiv woman during that time. In my last year of seminary, all of a sudden I started getting these requests to speak different places. So I was doing a lot of speaking. And, 39 years ago, there weren't a lot of women in ministry. And so I started doing a lot of speaking. And I met with the director of placement at the time, Jim Spickelmeyer, who was one of the former campus pastors. And he was all excited because Wooddale had a position for a children's pastor or a children's director, and he just thought that was me. And I remember thinking, I'm not a children's ministry person. I know myself, and that is not what I am called to do or feel comfortable doing. And Jim was so frustrated with me because he kept saying to me, you don't understand, as a woman in ministry, you're not going to get a position. You need to take this. It is Wooddale. And how exciting that it's Wooddale and they're interested in you. And I said to him, no, I have no desire to do that. Don't send my resume to Wooddale. I'm not going to do that. And he was flabbergasted because it's Wooddale and I'm not going to get a job. And he said, well, Sherry, what are you going to do? And because I was young and naive, I said, I'm just praying about it. I'm just praying about it. And so for 3 or 4 months in the spring, every day I would walk and pray. I had Keith Green, Songs of the Shepherd, on my little radio at the time. I don't even remember what those things are called. That was so long ago. And my Walkman. And I would walk around the campus, and as I would hit Lake Valentine, Holy, Holy, Holy would be playing, and I would just sit there and pray, and I would go, Lord, I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll do whatever you want me to do, but I know I am not a children's pastor, and I just truly believed that God would be faithful. And so I would walk, I would see that new dorm, Getch Hall, being built, and for probably 3 or 4 months, I would just walk around the college campus. And a few weeks later, he was all excited again. And he said, oh, Sherry, I know you don't want Wooddale, but Colonial Church of Edina has a children's ministry position. You have to apply for this. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this. And so Jim and I went through this journey together, and I would just keep walking and praying. My last week of seminary, I probably had 10 papers due. I hadn't slept for days. I was living on caffeine, and I was in the seminary coffee shop at the time. And President Brushharber's office at that time was in the second floor of the coffee shop. And I had sweats on, no makeup. I was exhausted. And George was walking up to his office, and he stopped and he saw me, and he leaned over the stairs and he said, Sherry, can I see you in my office? And I can remember thinking, he knows my name. I was so taken back that the president knew my name. And I was so afraid. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not going to graduate. I don't know what I've done. I knew I hadn't broken lifestyle, but I'm like, I'm not going to graduate. And I had this huge dilemma of, do I go home, change my clothes, put on some makeup, and go see, George in the Holy of Holies, or what do I do? And I can remember thinking, I was just so curious at what was going on. And I sat in George Brush Harbor's office, sweats, no makeup, exhausted. And he said to me, Sherry, we're creating a new position at the college to train and equip students and to help disciple them. And I believe you're that person. And I didn't know college campus ministry positions existed. In some ways, I felt a little torn because I felt called to be a youth pastor. But at the same time, I was so curious. Needless to say, I served in campus ministries because of that for 23 years. And George took a chance. I was the very first woman at that time to be in a ministry position like that. First woman to have an MDiv. And I spent the first 5 years as the director of discipleship before I became the pastor of discipleship. But that was a transformational moment with George. And as I look back at my call and my career and God's faithfulness, and I always stand in awe that the Lord called me to the place that I had walked and prayed for months. I love that. That preaches. That I walked and prayed this campus before I ever was called here, and how significant that was in my journey here. And those moments at Lake Valentine, there was a little bench there at the time, and I would just go and pour out my heart. And to see that God was faithful and that God led me in ways that I didn't even know existed, and to see that journey. So seminary is what brought me here. I believe the Lord brought me here in that journey of prayer, and I'm so thankful. I feel that was a divine moment with George there, and continue to have many divine moments with George throughout the years. Yeah, what was fascinating is I had male colleagues that came after me that didn't spend 5 years as a director. They immediately were hired as pastors. But there again, that was part of this journey in being a pioneer, is that I was the first. And, that is part of my experience as a woman in this setting, is I had to earn my dues in ways that many of my male colleagues had instant credibility. Throughout the years, I would have students, as they were applying for ministry positions in campus ministry, say to me, oh my goodness, my freshman year, I had this image of who you were. I thought you were this radical feminist. I thought, you were just this type of woman. But the more they got to know me, I would always hear, you are nothing like I thought. You are nothing like I thought. So, the campus pastor at the time would preach on Wednesdays. Instant credibility. No one questioned who he was or his title. I had to earn it. But that was part of my call here. And it was part of that. And what I found is once I earned students' trust, I had it, because it wasn't cheap. And that's something I just smile at. That's just part of the gender bias. But at the same time, I also had students that said, I had never seen a woman up front. I had come from a conservative church. I had never seen a woman preach before. Heather Heinz Fleece will say that's a part of her journey, is coming here and going, I had never seen a woman that could do that. And me throughout the years going, Heather, you're a pastor. God has called you to be a pastor. But I think that that was important. And so I started as a director of discipleship. 5 years later, I did the exact same job, had the exact same role, but with a different title. But Bethel was willing to let me grow and stretch my gifts and my passions. I started teaching creative evangelism here during interim. Loved that class. Taught that class for 20 years. Started teaching some of the youth ministry classes. Was able to teach spiritual formation. Taught at the seminary. And I think for me, one of the most rewarding teaching experiences was teaching, developing a Christian worldview for the CAPS program. And I quit teaching at the seminary to teach that program because that was the one program where people as adult learners didn't have to sign the faith statement. And I would have the most incredible opportunities to share for 5 weeks a Christian worldview and to be respectful of other people in that setting. And so I was the lead faculty for years teaching that class and loved that class. I preached once a month. I started out preaching once a month. And there again, I think to create a variety, depending on the gifts and the role of the campus pastors at the time, there were certain times that I would preach once a month. And then there were other times I would preach once a week. Typically, I would anchor Fridays. I would say, Fridays is a hard day. I'll take Fridays. And I love that. For me, because my primary passion was all of the freshman small groups, all of the mentoring groups on campus, I loved challenging faculty. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of connection between business students and involvement in campus ministries. I went to Sherm Swenson. I went to Paul Olson. I went to different people who had such success in business and said, will you mentor Bethel students and will you start mentoring groups? And saw the connection between preaching in chapel and pastoral care and in small groups and that ebb and flow that would happen here. Of all the incredible places I've gotten to preach, did a women's school of ministry, was able to pray at the United Nations. Of all the places that I've been able to minister, chapel is still my favorite pulpit of every place I've been. Something so powerful that would happen in that setting. I have a memory of a student that we were doing a series on people who had encountered Jesus at the well. And I have a couple of them. And this student I had seen in the hall, and she was shaking as she was walking forward. Now, typically students would come up after chapel and would say, oh, that was wonderful, Sherry. Oh, thank you. God really spoke through you. And it was usually positive feedback. She walked up to me, and she was shaking, and I'm kind of leaning in for the thank you moment. And she looked at me and she said, I think you're full of it. I want to be sensitive to our audience here. And I was so taken back. And I said, why do you think this? I never heard that in the middle of chapel and everyone around that. And she said to me, you have lied to me. You have lied to me. You've lied to everyone in this place. This isn't real and it isn't true. And I'm talking about Jesus healing this woman and socially healing her and the power of Jesus's love. And I said to her, would you like to get together with me and talk about this? And found out she was a Jehovah's Witness, grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, very conservative family background, had never had a party, never had a birthday party. And I began to meet with her. And Barb Martin and I threw her first birthday party, and I still have contact with her to this day. And a few weeks later, I did a story on the woman who had been caught in adultery, and she came forward again, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And she said to me, she stood there, and I said, I was thinking about you as I was preparing this message, and I thought, your Jesus would have stoned her. And she said, that's exactly right. And I said, but he didn't. And you see the grace of love and the forgiveness. And, those moments in chapel were powerful. My last semester here, I did a series on people whose lives were changed in chapel. Gary Haugen was here for a chapel, and a senior social worker, Cheryl, was so moved by this, and she said to him, what can I do? What can I do? And he said to her, come work with me. And she went and worked with him. And so this whole series of these incredible moments of God, of speakers, Brennan Manning came and spoke right after Hurricane Katrina. And one of the RDs had picked him up at the airport, and she said to me, Sherry, he's really fragile and weak. I don't know if he's going to be able to speak. And I'm like, oh, no. Because when Brennan Manning preached, everyone came. The Great Hall would be packed. And I will never forget the power of God. We would pray and hold hands in a circle with speakers beforehand. And he's holding my hand, and he's just shaking like this. And I'm thinking, this is not going to work. And I watched him begin to walk up the steps of the Great Hall. And physically, I could just feel the power of the Holy Spirit coming on this man. And all of a sudden, he got to the podium, and this loud Brennan Manning, powerful voice starts speaking. And I looked at the RD, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And you see, it's God. It's just God. So I love chapel because in 23 years, so many changes, but you see lives that are changed through that opportunity in those moments. My first year, the reason I had 2 full-time jobs is I went to apply to get an apartment, and I couldn't qualify because I wasn't making enough money. So I went to the campus pastor at the time, who earlier had said to me, I love working with single women. They work like dogs, and they're married to their ministry, which tells you volumes about the mindset of not only women, but of single women in this community. And I said, I can't get an apartment. So the solution was that I would get another job. And so not only did I do campus ministries full-time my first year, but I was in Getch Hall that had massive turnovers. And at the time, our enrollment was down. So I think they admitted students that typically they wouldn't have admitted. And they all ended up in Getch Hall because that was the last building that was being built. But I love that dorm, and I love that resident hall. And some of the relationships I still have to this day are because of Getch Hall. I had roles. I was the first woman to be on some of the multicultural task forces that we had. I also served as a member of the sexual harassment teams at Bethel. And so I worked closely with student life on a variety of issues that impacted students' well-being and their care. So campus ministries, teaching. I ended up doing a lot of teaching at the end. Loved that, probably more than I could balance at times. But it was powerful. And so many of those roles, so often the way that the system was set up is you typically needed one woman on some of these committees. Your token woman. And so at the time, it was typically either Judy Mosman or me. So throughout the years, there were a variety of other roles that I played just because we needed that diversity and that balance. Yeah, I graduated from seminary in 1985, 39 years ago. And I stayed here. We left in December of 2007. And I always smile. I love Bethel. And my last time of cleaning out my office and leaving, I turned on my radio, and Whitney Houston was playing "I Will Always Love You" on the radio. As I sobbed leaving the campus, I thought, you could have planned that better. But yeah, Whitney was singing "I Will Always Love You" as I left for the last time. I think there is definitely much more of an intentional commitment to diversity, which I think is such a blessing. And so I see that shift. I think that when I first came, students came with so much more of a connection to a specific church body. And so we had students in my first few years that primarily were coming from Baptist General Conference churches or Converge churches. And I think that shifted throughout the years. My first year here, I was hired. The campus pastor at the time was new, and he had talked the women's auxiliary into purchasing about $10,000 of Design for Discipleship fill-in-the-blank books. So my role was to have resident assistants lead a weekly Bible study. I would train them on Tuesdays, and then they would go and Wednesday nights lead these Bible studies. And about the second week, they came back and they said to me, "Sherry, we have a problem." And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Students hate these books." Just filling in the answer. And Sherry, we hate these books. And, I'm new. I've just graduated from seminary, and, I'm going to change the world. And I can remember walking back to my office, and I had like boxes, $10,000 worth of these books in my office, thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? That was transformational for me because I think at the time, the institution felt that the answer would somehow transform people's lives, and their knowledge of the Word of God would change their lives. And that was often the approaches in the church, and that was the approach at Bethel. That same year, Student Life called me because one of my former students, I had been a youth pastor, she had been caught breaking probably most of the lifestyle rules at the time in one setting. And, I had this list of write-ups that her RA had made of guy in her room drinking, da-da-da-da-da. And so I was going to confront her because they wanted me to confront her because obviously I had failed as her youth pastor. So I'll never forget, this was transformative. This changed my life in ministry and how I do ministry. And so I'm going through this with her. And I thought she would be embarrassed. I thought, there would be remorse and repentance and ask for forgiveness. She was defiant and angry. And she started using scripture against me about taking, the log out of my own eye, and ye without sin cast the first stone. And I didn't know what to do. And at the time I thought, oh my goodness, she must have been an Awana. I mean, she could just rattle off these verses, but she was using the Word of God to defend her behaviors. And the combination of fill in the blank in that began my journey of spiritual formation and how to really minister to students. So I saw a change and a transformation on how I ministered and what gives meaning and purpose to your life. Sharon Parks, who wrote the incredible book on the critical journey was one of my resources for my dissertation. And so that was a change. I think that I also saw in my latter years at Bethel this movement of this backwards movement of much more conservative theology. And I found myself being questioned more by students as they would come from some of our more conservative churches on the role of women. And unfortunately, some of the male students that I had significant mentoring roles in, I also watched them as they entered the church begin to take a more conservative stand. Men that I truly mentored who in the years also developed a more conservative theology. And I think that is reflective of the denomination. I think that Heather can have a role. I think Steph Williams has a role, but I think that they often become exceptions. I was often said, Sherry, you can be the exception to some of the theology, but that doesn't mean the theology for all women is inclusive. I was so blessed with the saints that went before me. And I had incredible women that had gone before me. Marie Schultz and Edna Schultz, who were these single women at Bethel. Marie was the director of church relations at Bethel. My first year here as a single, I think I was 26, 27, I went to her and I said, I have way too much freedom. I need someone that can hold me accountable. Will you disciple me? And she looked at me and she went, I can't disciple you, but I can pray for you. And until the few weeks before she died, Marie Schultz prayed for me every day. Almost 40 years. This woman prayed for me, prayed for my family. When our son Eric was diagnosed with stomach cancer for 5 years, every day, Marie prayed for me and spoke truth into my life, and was such a significant spiritual mentor to me and prayer warrior for me. Our son Eric died in January. Marie died 3 days later. And I often said to my husband, knowing Marie, she thought, Sherry, this has been a full-time job. He's in heaven. I've done my job. I'm going home. And there's a part of me that really believes that. Her faithfulness and her love for me and my family throughout the years was powerful. Her sister Edna, Marilyn Starr, who was the Dean of Women, was a mentor for Don, my husband. But Marilyn Starr was such a incredible woman. Evelyn Christensen, who wrote the book, What Happens When Women Pray, was one of Billy Graham's prayer warriors. She and Nancy Lundquist would sit in the front row when I was on the preaching team at Calvary Baptist. And I thought, I was surrounded by these incredible women. Nancy Lundquist was a powerful model for me. Nancy preached in chapel one day, another significant chapel moment. And she was very humorous, the President Carl Lundquist's wife. And she said to the students, I pray for you every day. You could hear a pin drop. It was so powerful. And then she brought out her humor and she said, do you want to see what an old relic looks like? They usually bring me out for special events. And she twirled around the platform, and she had students captivated. This older woman had them captivated. And I can remember after chapel, I walked up to her and I said, oh, Nancy, I love you. I said, Nancy, you're my hero. I said, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And I'll never forget Nancy Lundquist saying to me, "Oh, Sherry, you need to be aiming so much higher," which is just so typical Nancy Lundquist, which makes me just honor her and love her even more. I was in California. We were teaching some classes in conjunction with the seminary in Converge, and I was flying back to Minnesota to teach a class, and by God's grace was here for Nancy Lundquist's funeral, her celebration of life. And her daughter walked up to me and said, "Sherry, I think you would love to hear this story." And I'm not sure. I know Nancy was in her 80s when she died. And she said, "I know you would love to hear this." She said, when Mom was in hospice, the last few days, even to the last few days of her life, she was sharing the gospel with her hospice nurse, and so intentional in praying for her hospice nurse and wanting to lead her to the Lord. And I'm like, that's who I want to be. I want to be Nancy Lundquist. To my last breath, I want to be doing that. So, Eunice Cronholm was another woman that was significant, and they were all friends, this incredible group of women. When I was still single, Edna and Marie had a cabin next to Marilyn Starr's cabin up north, and they invited me for the weekend. And so here are these saints and all these women who are probably 30 years older than I am, and I'm the young woman along with this group. And I'll never forget them circling. We were having a meal or something, and Marilyn Starr looked over at me and she said, "Sherry, there's a lot of wisdom around this table. I hope you're soaking this up." And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm in the presence of incredible women. And they were the backbone of so many things at Bethel. I don't believe they ever received the praise or the acknowledgement of the contributions that they made, and the significant roles that they played here at Bethel created such an incredible foundation. So yeah, I am very blessed. I find myself at times, as I am working with younger women in particular, I have one that I'm mentoring, and I shared Marie's story, and I've said to her, "I will be your Marie. I will be your Marie. I will be that person that will pray for you and encourage you and be available to you." So, incredible women. For me, I understood call. I still at times find that this is about call. It isn't about an easy setting. And so for me, I knew that I was a pioneer. I knew that I was the first woman in many of these settings, which adds an element of pressure and expectation. Somebody else could, have a C sermon, and that's fine. I always felt that I not only was representing myself, but I was making it a challenge for other women. I had someone early on confront me because I'm a people pleaser. And I had spoken at Trout Lake Camp, and the campus pastor at the time had spoken for the high school students. I had spoken for 5th and 6th grade girls. He had one event, there maybe 100, high school students. I had 350 little 5th and 6th grade girls, and there were so many they had to split it into 2 groups. So I did twice the work that he did. They paid him like $600 and flew him back from vacation to round trip tickets, blah, blah, blah. I got a pair of earrings for the week. And, because I was one of the first women doing some speaking outside of Bethel and those type of things, people would say, what do you want? And I'm, oh, no, that's okay. Oh, you don't have to pay me. Oh, it's such an honor just to be able to be here and stuff. And one of my mentors from the seminary, Cindy Shepard, confronted me. And she said, Sherry, you're the first woman that's doing a lot of this. And you might not need that money, or you might feel awkward doing this. But the next woman who comes behind you might be a single mom, or might be somebody who needs this. And by you being a people pleaser or minimizing your contributions or your gifts, you will make it harder for women who will follow you. So I felt that became important not only for me, but for women who would follow me. Many of my bonuses and raises at Bethel came as male colleagues were hired, and were hired at a different pay scale than I was. I had an MDiv, I had a doctorate of ministry and a lot of experience. And so I can remember in one of those settings going to the director of HR at the time. I saw her in the hall. And I said, this has been on my mind for a few weeks. And I said, I have no proof of this, but in my gut and in my spirit, I sense that there's some gender inequity in pay with my colleague who doesn't have D-men, all those things. And I received a 10% raise in probably 3 weeks. Now, the HR person after her said to me, oh, it must have been an issue for Bethel to do that. And so, that was a growing edge for me, because I saw my role as one, important for me, which is very difficult because I would rather take care of you than take care of me. But I saw that as an important role to be a voice and an advocate for other women, because I was the first. But yes, there was a lot of gender equity. I would often hear, you don't look like a woman in ministry. I have no idea what that means. But probably when I was younger, the older I got, I stopped hearing that. But I think in my younger days, I would hear that a lot, is you don't look like a woman in ministry. When I was in seminary, when I was taking preaching classes, I was told you got to wear your hair up in a bun and the suit and stuff like that. And, I'm just feisty enough. I'm a people pleaser, but I'm feisty enough. The next sermon was pink dress, hair. I'm going, no. My husband, throughout the years, has been my advocate and has been my support and encourager. Don has pushed me in ways that I typically would not push myself. Campus Ministries in my 23 years, there were a variety of lead pastors that came and went, and some pretty challenging moments in their journeys and how that impacted the rest of us. So I think I was the interim at least 3 times in those transition times. The second to the last time I was interim, Don pushed me and he said, you need to apply to be campus pastor. And because there was so much transition and turmoil at times, people really saw me as the anchor and the solid one in so much of that. And he said to me, Sherry, you need to apply to be campus pastor. And he said, now you need to know the administration will never hire you. And he said, it's going to hurt like hell. It's going to be embarrassing and humiliating, but you're not doing this for you. You need to apply to be campus pastor and push this so that a woman can be campus pastor someday. And that's exactly what happened. And, the person that was hired had never been a campus pastor, had never had that experience, and lasted a semester here, and then I became campus pastor again after that. But in that transition, then Laurel Bunker became the campus pastor. And, I'd met her numerous times, and I've shared that story with her. And I believe that there again, that was part of my role, is to be the woman to push that, not having the title and not receiving that opportunity, but had a significant role in the history of that and in the journey of that. And my decision to leave Bethel was during Welcome Week. It was during the Koinonia service, and really vacillating on whether we should go to California or not. And I love Bethel, but I knew George was retiring and a lot of things going on. And Steph Williams, who I love dearly, have challenged. I saw God's anointing on her when she was an RD, and I said, hey, I've been asked to speak at this women's basketball camp, this high school basketball camp. I said, I'm not an athlete. I was a baton twirler. I'm not an athlete. I said, Steph, why don't you go do this? Come back, and let's just see how it was. In the zone, loved it. Okay, now we're going to get you to preach in chapel. And I saw that in her. And so I love Steph, and was one of those encouragers in the beginning of her journey. I had said to Michael Bender when I was leaving, you have to find Steph Williams, have her in your preaching class, which was significant in their partnership at Mill City. And Steph was a part of the Koinonia service, and she did a spoken word. And I felt like God said, you can leave. God's hand let go. And she's here. There are women here that will continue this journey. And so for me, so much of the pain was spiritual. When I look at Jesus, for I don't know how many years, I would always do the service for Welcome Week on Hebrews 12, 1 through 3. Leave it behind. I love that passage for parents saying goodbye to their kids and the cloud of parents and faculty that are here to encourage you. Leave high school behind and run with perseverance this new race. And the third verse of that is always, consider him who endured such opposition from sinful people so that you do not grow weary and lose heart. When I was at Bethel, that was just kind of the, you might not get along with your roommate. Sometimes people can be mean here. And there wasn't really any significance of that. But throughout the years, that has become primary, is that as you continue this journey, and I think being a woman in ministry in a much more conservative setting, that we look to Christ, who endured opposition, and for the joy set before him endured the cross, so that we don't grow weary and lose heart. When I came back from California, I said to people, I have 3 new theologians. I wish I had found them sooner, but I have 3 new theologians in my life as I continue this journey as a woman in ministry. The first is Taylor Swift. Liars are going to lie. Haters are going to hate. Shake it off. Kelly Clarkson. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And Katy Perry. I got the eye of the tiger. And you lean in because this is what God has called you to do. My legacy is students. Not titles. It's students. My legacy is getting a Facebook message from someone that I took to United because she was suicidal, and of her saying, thank you. I'm still here. So that becomes a part of the legacy. So, you know what? Life's hard. The older I get, life is hard. I I think with our nonprofit, I think with the death of our son, it has changed our focus. And for Don and I to be at that journey of life that we walk beside young women and young men who are struggling in ministry, to continue to encourage them on that journey with people who are struggling with cancer. We understand. And so I think the God of hope and comfort who's comforted us then takes that journey, and you either become bitter and angry, or you say, all right, let me help you. All of the things that God has refined in my life become a part of that journey for others. I think people have a desire to be loved. I think that people want to be seen. I'm serving now as a chaplain at 6 different Ebenezer sites, and I've often commented there's some similarities between seniors and memory care and students at Bethel. They want to have relationship. They want to have meaning and purpose in life. One of the settings I was having lunch with a woman who was so loud. And another group of ladies at another table were irritated by this. And, I could just tell that this new woman who was just coming to this facility was going to have a hard time. And I thought, oh my goodness, this reminds me of Bethel, of students trying to fit in and students to find their group and be a part of things. And so I think the ministry changes, but all of us have a desire to be loved and to be needed and to have significance. I think I've changed a lot. I love to preach at Point Loma, and I love to be able to go to the Christian colleges and speak at Westmont and do the retreats and fly here and there. I think that that gave value and purpose for me in my younger years. For me now, what is significant has changed. What does it mean to serve God has changed. One of the chaplains I work with said to me this week that he leads a service in memory care, and he has a retired older pastor in this group. And he said he can't remember his name. He can't remember his wife's name. He can't even remember where he is. But for a half an hour during that memory care service, he thinks he's the pastor, and that my colleague is coming to his service, and that every week this retired pastor thanks him for coming to his service. And my colleague said to me, what a gift that for that half hour I can honor him. And he said, and as soon as he walks out the door, he's forgotten everything. But for that half hour, he has identity and purpose. And my colleague said, I pray that someone's as gracious to me. And I laughed. I said, not knowing me, I'm going to be the one going, let me preach this for you. Let me do this for you. But I find that to see people and to see that they are loved by God and the grace and the humanity. I have a woman in one of my facilities that can be very disruptive. She isn't able to communicate. And at times, as I'm leading hymn sings or I'm doing a little message on the Lord as my shepherd, she's disruptive. And I was walking by her room one day, and at this facility, they have a bio of each of the different residents and a picture when they were young. That's beautiful. And I'm walking by, and what caught my eye is this beautiful woman that looked like Farrah Fawcett back in the day. And I lean in and I'm like, it's her. It's her. And as I'm reading her bio, she was the first woman stockbroker, had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, had built a lighthouse in Oregon and had lived in it. And I'm sitting there going, I'm in the presence of an incredibly gifted pioneer. And a few days later, when I left, I said to her, bye, dear. I hope you have a good week. Never communicates. And she said to me, I hope you do too. And I thought, the Spirit of God is still there. And by God's grace, I have an opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus for this woman. So I think that things have changed. I went to the Methodist for 5 years because I had spoken probably about 6 years ago at a women's retreat in Eldora, Iowa, which I had spoken throughout the years at Eldora, Iowa. I love Eldora, Iowa, and a former Bethel student was the director, so I did this for her. So I'm at this women's retreat, and I had a woman come up to me, and the director was all concerned because there was a church that would not allow their women to come because they were concerned about me, because as a pastor, I would be a bad influence on their women. This is 6 years ago. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have served this denomination for over 30 years. I've trained and equipped. I train and equip probably 100, 125 student leaders a year. So thousands of students who are now pastors in the church and lay leaders in the church. And I thought, I've reached the point where I can't even speak at a women's retreat because I'm going to be a bad influence. And had coffee after that with a colleague from United, who was a former Bethel person. And he gave my name to the Methodists. So that's how I ended up for 5 years with the Methodists. Now, I was on loan to the Methodists. I was a Converge pastor on loan to the Methodists. Was not Methodist, but they were borrowing me for 5 years. And so it's just fascinating to me, my journey in that, and that after all of my years, that's how I would be perceived. And what was fascinating is a few of the women apparently were rebellious and came anyway and said, this is crazy. This is crazy. This was so good. Thank you. Thank you for coming. So, yeah, there have been a lot of changes. I have really debated on whether I need to take a break from Facebook until after the election. People who I love who are just so mean-spirited and are so closed-minded. And, I was president of, I was friends with the president of the Minnesota Atheist, August Berkshire. I would have him come and speak in my creative evangelism classes. We're still Facebook friends to this day. And I still have a very respectful relationship. And he came and did a sermon with me at Calvary. I was doing a message, and I have a friend that doesn't believe that God exists. And I had contacted him, and I said, August, can I videotape you? And he goes, well, why don't I come and do it in person? And I'm like, oh my goodness, it was beautiful. And I often say to people who have such extreme views, if I can be friends with the president of Minnesota Atheists and we can be respectful, we totally disagree. I don't know why we can't have dialogue and respect. And so I see that as a part of the trend in our world and our country right now. And that impacts the views of women in some pretty profound ways. And that makes me sad, because to me, it's about an inclusive grace and a love of God for others. I want to share this, because this is not only my journey, but those significant moments at Bethel. I saw God. I always say to people, I love working with college students, because they were naive. They thought God could do anything. They thought they could do anything. And because of that, I saw incredible miracles throughout the years. I had 2 young women who had done a semester at Gordon College, came back and said to me, Mary Sue Barron and Amy Sharam, we want to start Vespers. And I'm like, oh, gee, we've tried this before. This isn't going to work. And, that was my mindset as I was talking to them, and they were so excited and enthusiastic. And I'm like, so what musical instruments do you play? Oh, we don't play it. No guitar, no piano. No, we don't play, but we pray. And we've been praying about this. And so I started meeting with Mary Sue and Amy, and they came with their plan, and they had gathered some people to be a part of this team, and they found a guitar player and stuff. And they said to me, well, we want to do this in the gym. And I'm like, oh no, and I'm like, you want a small setting, and I'm thinking this isn't going to work anyway. And I said, why don't you meet in a classroom? Let's start in a classroom. So they met in a classroom. First Vespers was in a classroom, came back the next week, and they said, we packed the classroom. We want to meet in the gym. And I'm like, oh, how about the AC lounge? Let's just wait until it grows and it's big, and then we'll start. And so they filled the AC lounge the second night of Vespers, and then they came back and they said, okay, we want to go to the gym. They really wanted this in the gym. And so I said, okay, you can do it in the gym. And I can remember driving over that night, and my prayer was that, Lord, help Mary Sue and Amy not to be discouraged, and give me my teachable moment with them so that I can get them back in the AC lounge. And one of those God moments for me at Bethel, I'm standing in the doorway of the gym as hundreds of students start flooding into this gym. And I felt like the Lord saying to me, Sherry, I'm going to do a major work on this campus. I'm going to have a movement on this campus. And the campus pastor is the one standing in the way. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. And let God be God. And, how powerful that ministry was. I don't even know what's going on with Vespers now, but the significance of 2 very quiet young women who had a dream and a vision and were women of prayer. And truly, that was their vision. And for me, the teachable moment was me of saying, get out of the way and let the Lord be God in this setting. And I was in California, and Tony Ducklow had called me and asked me to come back and do a junior high retreat at, I think it was Gustavus, for junior high students for his Ministries Summerfest camp that's outreach based. And I'm like, Tony, I'm too old to be speaking to junior high students. And he said, Sherry, all I want you to do is share the gospel for 5 days. And I'm like, I'm in. Flew back, dorm with no air conditioning, and it was powerful. But there was a student counselor there who I had heard's dad had just died, and they wanted me to meet with him. So I met with this young guy, can't remember his name. And as we're processing his grief and his father dying, he said to me, the thing that's keeping me going now is I think he lived in Eau Claire or someplace in Wisconsin. And he said, every Sunday night, I drive to St. Paul to this Christian college, Bethel, and I go to their Vespers ministries. And he said, Vespers is what has helped me through this journey. And Don said to me, did you tell him the journey? Did you tell him your role in Vespers? And I said, no. But I didn't need to. I didn't need to. That's not my legacy. I don't need the credit for that. What was important is that God continued to bless that ministry, and years later, I had them come back, Mary Sue and Amy, at the 10-year reunion of Vespers and speak in chapel, and the present leaders washed their feet. It's pretty powerful, and that's the legacy. That's the important piece. Not some grieving young man hearing my story. It's me hearing his story of how God used that. So the Vespers story is a story of young women, college women that were bold enough to keep pushing me, and for me to finally get out of the way and let God work on this campus. I truly love Bethel. I said to you before, I'm always seeing this as the house of God. I did a message a few weeks ago on Bethel, and I'm like, oh my goodness, Bethel, the house of God. I pray that students here have an understanding of the power of changing the world, and the power of being the hands and feet of Jesus, and that they have an opportunity to make a difference. Oh, I have one more story. Our daughters were born in Fargo, North Dakota. Our daughters are adopted. And I think of this in being the hands and feet of Jesus. And Lauren and Lindsay were in intensive care for a week, tubes everywhere. They had tubes down their throat and a little light so that we knew when they were crying. And it was overwhelming. It was absolutely overwhelming. At one point, the birth mom was thinking about changing her mind. Their family said to us, please do not leave the state. This will be a disaster. And so it was a up and down roller coaster. I'm going to write a book some year on our journey with them. But in the midst of that, one night in intensive care, I'm holding one of the twins, absolutely overwhelmed. And this young nurse came up to me and she said to me, Sherry, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm a Bethel nurse. I am a Bethel nurse. And she said, I want you to know that we've gathered other Christian nurses in this hospital and we are praying for you. And for years, I would do the pinning ceremony for the nursing department. And probably 10, 12 years I did that. Every year I would sob. And I would say to them, I don't know who she is. I can't remember her name. I don't know what she looks like, except that I know that she was a Bethel nurse. And she forever changed my life. Because she was the hands and the feet of Jesus at one of the lowest crisis moments of my life. And I will forever love Bethel nurses. And then I would challenge them and I'd say, so you go and be the hands and feet of Jesus, and you do this in someone else's life, and be that nurse or be that doctor or be that banker or whoever that person is. And so that is my prayer, that what makes students different here is that we have an opportunity to make a difference and to love people. And it isn't always in the grandiose things. it's in those moments of despair, and it's in those moments where we wash people's feet and no one sees and no one knows. So that's my prayer for Bethel, is that Bethel will always be a place that transforms people's lives and transforms our world.